I was in 8th grade at Eastmore Junior High School, and Lori was a sophomore. I was 13, she was 15. It was a Friday night. Everybody went to the football game. Lori went to a couple people's parties after the football game. She was supposed to spend the night with one of her friends.
By 11 the next morning, Lori still hasn't come home.
Lori Nesslin's mother started to make some phone calls to friends to see if anybody had seen Lori or if she had spent the night somewhere.
They said no. The last that they had heard is Lori was just gonna go home. She's gonna walk home. It was 1974. We walked places.
And then she contacted the Columbus Police Department to file a missing persons report.
My mother was scared to death, but she would not portray that to me because she did not want to scare me.
A husband and wife were hunting for hedge apples, and they see deceased young female laying in a ditch.
Detectives responded, and they document that it's a white female in her late teens.
She had no clothes on. She did have what appeared to be some bruising on her left arm. It was not obvious to them what had caused the death of this young woman.
They don't see any telltale sign like a rope around the neck or a gunshot wound or anything like that. And then they examine the bottom of her feet, which appear to be, for the most part, clean.
It led the investigators after the fact to believe that whatever happened to the young woman happened somewhere else, and then she was left there on Rose Hill Road. A friend of Lori's called the police department and notified them that a friend of his matched the description of the young woman that was found in Reynoldsburg, deceased.
Police asked Joyce Nesson to come to the morgue to identify her daughter's body.
She said, I need to talk to you about Lori. And I looked at her and I said, oh, well, what about her? And she said, she's not coming home. She's gone. She died.
The autopsy was conducted the next day. It was determined that she did have some kind of sexual relation with somebody, but it was not ruled that she was raped. And the manner of death was not ruled homicide. They just weren't able to determine what that reason was.
It's possible that she had a drug overdose or she died of some other cause and was taken there by someone who panicked and dumped them. The toxicology report is still pending, and so they continue to investigate this as a suspicious death. So the investigators, they do just a number of different interviews with fellow friends, students, parents, just about anybody who had contact with her through the football game or any of these after parties.
Lori was last seen by a friend leaving the party at about 10 after midnight. And then again, within a few minutes after that, two more friends that had me driving by saw Lori walking.
Lori lives just a few minutes' walk away from the party she'd gone to. Lori's body was found miles away from her home. Investigators believe she'd accepted a ride from someone.
Everybody was very adamant about Lori would not get into a car with a stranger. No way, okay? So the police said that she got into a car with someone she knew.
Reynoldsburg police actually got a phone call that somebody had found shoes on the side of the road in Gahanna, which is a neighboring suburb. And then another report came in that the sweater and the jeans were found. The clothing was located approximately 3 miles from where Lori's body was found.
Lori's clothes and shoes are strewn along the right side of the road.
It would be logical to draw the idea that there were perhaps 2 people in the car when that clothing was thrown out. Someone's driving, and then someone's in the passenger side from where the clothing went out the window.
The toxicology results came back from Lori's autopsy, and there was no drugs or no alcohol in her blood.
Once they received the final coroner's report, it's not ruled as a homicide. It's ruled as a accidental death from unknown origin. There's more questions than answers.
You didn't have to be some kind of brain to look at the circumstances surrounding her death and where her clothes were and where her body was in relation to where we lived. How anybody could rule that as anything but a homicide is beyond me.
The accidental death ruling means the end of the investigation. Lori's case goes as cold as Ohio's icy winter winds.
I contacted Tony. I felt she deserved answers. Her family deserved answers. And I felt that we had an opportunity now to do this, to do it right. The county coroner and some of the other physicians would have to sit down and review all the aspects of the case before the elected coroner would sign off on it.
In September of 2020, after 5 months of deliberation, the coroner's office comes back with a decision.
The manner of death had been overturned from undetermined to homicidal violence.
17-year-old Karen Adams had been murdered just 6 months after Lori, back in 1975.
And if you were to draw a straight line between the locations of both of those victims, it's probably only 2.5 miles at best. We felt very strongly that there might be a connection between these 2 crimes.
Karen was never out late at night. The next morning, Karen was reported missing. I was driving around, talking with her friends, trying to find my sister. I found her car in a parking lot. I knew something was wrong. She would have never left that car. Never.
It was roughly 6 to 8 miles east of Whitehall, where Karen lived. 2 people just happened to look in the ditch and saw a body.
We got the call from the police. They'd found her body.
A 2010 forensic test on Karen's clothes reveals the DNA profiles of 2 unknown males.
They put them in CODIS, which is the system that identifies suspects. One came back as unknown, and one was a known male that had done time in prison for rape and kidnapping, and his name was Robert Meyer.
Meyer had been arrested and convicted for raping and kidnapping 2 women in Toledo, Ohio in 1976, just a year after Karen Adams' murder. He spent 25 years in prison and was released in 2001.
When he was released, he was required to provide a DNA sample because of his conviction.
We just needed to get a DNA swab from him to verify the hit that I got in CODIS from the lab. So I got DNA swabs from each cheek and took those swabs right to the lab to be compared.
Detectives showed up my door They said they had a DNA hit with CODIS. And as soon as they get the evidence confirmed, they were going to arrest him. It all came back like a flood. They arrested him. He pleads guilty to murder. He was convicted, sentenced, 25 years in life. You know, he died 4 years later.
Meyer's arrest and death bring some closure to the case. But the identity of Karen's other attacker is still a mystery.
I discovered that he had an accomplice in Toledo. That person's name was Charles Weber.
Robert Meyer and Charles Weber actually met in prison back in the early to mid 1960s. They lived together as soon as they get out of prison, and one of them's out of prison not 2 weeks, and we have Lori Nesson show up dead. Charles Weber went to prison until 1989, and he was released, and he died 3 years later, so we didn't have the opportunity to get his DNA.
4 years later, in March of 2016, Detective Clark tracks down Charles Weber's biological son and, using familial DNA, confirms Weber was the second suspect in Karen Adams' murder.
So I had started comparing Karen's profile from her underwear to the profile from Lori's jeans. They were identical. And not only did we get one foreign individual, but the same 2 foreign individuals that did this to Lori.
I'm very upset that they never had to pay for what they did to my sister.